Welcome back, my friends from cyberspace. Sorry it's been a while since I've uploaded a video, but I've been kind of busy. You might say I've been busier than a stray cat at a dog show. Alright, it wasn't that funny. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and look at Dei Verbum. And so we're looking at the document Dei Verbum, document on divine revelation. And so we've been working our way through chapter 2 of the document. And again, if you want to follow along in the document itself, you can go to the Vatican website, which is www.vatican.va, and you can go scroll down to resource documents, click there, you'll see documents for Vatican II, click that, and then it will give you the documents we listed out there, and you can select those in whatever language you would like. And so I think we'll just jump right back into it. And so we are on paragraph 8 in the document, and I'm going to be going along with the document as it is online. Although you can use the books like the Vatican, there's some books that came out on this Second Vatican Council. Alright, so we're on paragraph 8. And so the apostolic preaching, which is expressed in a special way in the inspired books, was to be preserved by an unending succession of preachers until the end of time. It's always interesting to reflect on that passing on of the faith. Like, remember, for instance, who passed on the faith to you? And what a great gift that was that person gave you. I've got something for you. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Therefore the apostles, handing on what they themselves had received, warn the faithful to hold fast to the traditions which they have learned either by word of mouth or by letter, and to fight in defense of the faith handed on once and for all. Now what was handed on by the apostles includes everything which contributes toward the holiness of life and increase in faith of the peoples of God. And so the Church in her teaching, life, and worship perpetuates and hands on to all generations all that she herself is, all that she believes. And so it just kind of gives a summary of the different things that are involved in what is handed on by the faith, and it's kind of emphasizing tradition here. But I liked what it said here. It said, in her teaching, life, and worship. And the worship, of course, it's talking about the Mass, the liturgy, most especially, and that worship and how that informs us and teaches us and nourishes us in our faith life. And it is the Church that perpetuates that. This tradition, which comes from the apostles, develops in the Church with the help of the Holy Spirit. For there is a growth in the understanding of the realities and the words which have been handed down. This happens through the contemplation and study made by believers who treasure these things in their hearts, through a penetrating understanding of the spiritual realities which they experience, and through the preaching of those who have received through episcopal succession the sure gift of truth. For as the centuries succeed one another, the Church constantly moves forward toward the fullness of divine truth until the words of God reach their complete fulfillment in her. Now this is interesting, and I think it's important for us to remember as well, is that this tradition is developing. So one time I remember a priest asked me, before I was a priest, he asked, now if we knew exactly how Jesus had celebrated the first Mass, at the Last Supper, is that the way that we should celebrate the Mass? Not necessarily, because the Holy Spirit inspires the Church and leads and guides the Church to develop. And so we come into a deeper understanding of the realities and the words that have been handed down to us. And even the liturgy itself, we've seen that it has changed and adapted over the centuries, but nonetheless it remains. It has the main elements there that are necessary for it, but nonetheless we do see that change over time. And so how beautiful that is, that as we continue our growth, we continue our understanding of the church, we do grow in deeper understanding, and that the Holy Spirit is still with us. The Holy Spirit is still guiding and leading the church. The words of the Holy Fathers witness to the presence of this living tradition, whose wealth is poured into the practice and life of the believing and praying church. Through the same tradition, the church's full canon of the sacred books is known, and the sacred writings themselves are more profoundly understood and unceasingly made active in her. And thus God, who spoke of old uninterruptedly, converses with the bride of his beloved Son, and the Holy Spirit, through whom the living voice of the gospel resounds in the church, and through her, in the world, leads unto all truth those who believe, and makes the word of Christ dwell abundantly in them. And now we'll just make a little point of clarification. Now if you notice, in this last section that we were reading, it made reference to the Holy Fathers. And I believe what it's referring to is the Fathers of the Church. There's a nice book here called The Fathers Know Best. It was written by Jimmy Akin, and he talks about the Fathers of the Church. I'm just going to read a little section here that talks about who the Fathers of the Church were. And it's interesting to note that the Second Vatican Council really tried to look back at the Fathers of the Church, kind of going back to its roots. So here's what Jimmy Akin has to say about the Fathers of the Church. Certain individuals in the early Christian centuries are referred to as Church Fathers, or the Fathers of the Church. The origin of this analogy is found in the New Testament, which depicts the apostles as the fathers both of individual converts and as the fathers of particular churches. Since the apostles spiritually provided for, taught, and disciplined those under their care, it was natural to apply the analogy of fatherhood to them, though of course this has its limits and must not be confused with the unique fatherhood of God. After the time of the apostles, others also spiritually provided for, taught, and disciplined the Christian community, and it was natural to apply the analogy of fatherhood to them as well. This was the case especially with bishops, who were regarded as the spiritual fathers of the communities that they served. In time, the concept came to be applied in a general way to those who shaped the faith and practice of the Church in its earliest centuries. They became fathers not only for their own age, but for all ages that would follow. Some of these, the ones who heard the preaching of the apostles themselves or lived very shortly after the time of the apostles, came to be called the Apostolic Fathers or Sub-Apostolic Fathers. Together with the fathers of later ages, they were important witnesses to the apostolic tradition. Though pronounced somewhat differently in Greek and Latin, the word for father in both languages is pater. A number of terms have been derived from this word, and on account of it, we refer to the early Christian centuries as the patristic age, the age of the fathers, and to the study of the fathers as patrology. And so we see then that these early church fathers are very important in the formation of the faith and are rightly referred to, are rightly referenced by the those of the Vatican Council and in theology and those kinds of things, because they're so important to the history of our church and the formation of the faith. Well, friends, that's about all I have for you right now. I'll try to have something for you next week. See ya.